Hi everyone, I'm Dana Kohut, founder of the Prime View series of interviews with top business and technology leaders. Today my guest is Nathan Hall, Vice President of Systems Engineering at Pure Storage, a company that builds robust, all-flash data storage hardware and software products. Nathan, thank you so much for taking the time to joining me today. And my first question is about your technological background. You've been part of such companies as Dell, Hewlett-Packard, and now for almost 3 years you are working at Pure. Tell us more about your career and the steps that have led you to your current position.
Sure. Happy to, Dana. So I'd say more than anything, although my career has been in technology pretty much since I got out of college, my career has really been, for me, a repeated lesson in how important culture is to the degree of a company's eventual success, and also how critical it is to protect great company culture by just being uncompromising and hiring the best talent in the industry. I know, obviously, you look at market dynamics and cycles, and obviously timing plays a really big role too. But I've been at a company that was in the exact right place at the exact right time, and the outcome of that company had was mediocre at best because we allowed our culture and the average level of talent to kind of erode from great to good. So that's, more than anything, that's been kind of the lesson that it's taken me a while to learn over my career. I really kind of first started looking at what's the role I want to have. And then I was looking at, I kind of prioritize the technology over the role. I'm interested in following specific technology trends and getting closer to that technology. And it's only recently that I've begun to prioritize the culture a company has over all of their aspects. And that's ultimately why I'm at Pure today. When I had decided that I wanted to look for a new opportunity, I was kind of initially looking at different types of technologies that I might be interested in. And Pure was not on the list by any means. It wasn't a sector that I was particularly interested in. But I knew some individuals there, and kind of going through the experience of having the right place, the right time technology that I was at, and watching that company, it didn't crash and burn by any means, but just not have this outcome that it could have had, made me realize how important culture is, and really more than anything, like the level of talent that you're able to attract and then keep passionate and keep them excited, right? If you have a culture that promotes attracting top talent that is passionate, it almost doesn't matter what your current initiatives are, because you can do anything. And that's what I saw with, that's kind of the weird juxtaposition that I saw is that even though the company I was at previously was in the right place at the right time, they allowed the average level of talent to kind of erode from great to good, right? Going the kind of the wrong direction. And because they didn't kind of capitalize on, what is our culture? What are we trying to build that is unique here? How do we protect it? It ultimately inhibited the overall goal of the company, which was to be a leader in a certain technology space. And so to me, it became obvious that if you find a company that has a really good methodology of hiring the best and rewarding the best and promoting this kind of A+ culture, that they will naturally find the right trajectory in terms of their vision and the technology that they focus on by virtue of just having top talent.
Wow, that's a very personal insight on how companies might treat their best talent. So thanks, Nathan, for sharing that. I've been doing research preparing for this interview, and on your website, I could see that Pure promotes such a concept called modern data experience. Could you please elaborate a little bit more on the concept? What is it about and how it has evolved over the years?
It's actually a relatively new notion, or at least the term itself is relatively new. We haven't used that phrase for most of our 10 years of company. We just started using it, I think, last year. But it is kind of encompasses what we've been focused on in Spirit since day one. A lot of people think of Pure, especially in the IT infrastructure industry, as the company that mainstreamed flash into the storage market. Prior to Pure, it wasn't like we were the first one that had flash as a media, period, but predominantly enterprise storage was made up of spinning disk, with flash being a small portion of it at best. And reality, yes, that's what we're known for, but we were focused on this larger opportunity from day one, which is the fact that we looked at the major storage vendors and the foundational architectures of the products they sold, and virtually all of them came into prominence at the beginning of the dot-com boom in the 90s. So you think since then, we've seen the decline of Unix, the rise of Linux, virtualization, the cloud, containerization, and yet all of these data platforms and the vendors that were the leading vendors had largely been born before that, and their architectures and business models were really the same. So we looked at the opportunity and between the rise of digital and companies believing that digital and their data is more important than anything else. And we saw this opportunity to rethink the way that companies store and manage their data in the context of modern app and platform architectures that have taken place in those multiple cycles since. So that's really what the modern data experience is. It's really the kind of experience that we're providing from having the opportunity to clean sheet an architecture, as opposed to the decades of tech debt that a lot of other architectures would have, and also kind of clean sheet a business model that's focused on what are companies trying to do with their data today, and how can we best support that as a data storage company, and that's what we call the modern data experience.
Nathan, you've been in the data storage industry for quite a while. So maybe you could provide us with a prediction where this market of data storage is going to in the next couple of years.
And I hinted at it a little bit in terms of as a service. I believe that all storage is going as a service. You see that today it exists in the cloud, whether it's EBS or S3, or Azure files or disks, but largely companies where the majority of data still resides, their on-premises infrastructures are still purchased by companies, managed by their own practitioners, et cetera. And I think within 5 years, almost 100% of that will become as a service, and it won't be the customer, the end user, responsible for administering the units or doing capacity management or the plumbing work that's often associated with it. It will basically be customers will consume storage as a service, and it won't really matter where it is because it will be consumed in the same way, whether they're in a physical data center or at an edge site or in a public cloud. It'll all look functionally the same to them. It'll have the same capability of scaling up or scaling down, and it will be largely consumed by non-IT generalists in the business. To me, it also has an interesting thing because it starts to go at the motivations for why there's so much public cloud growth as is. Public cloud is largely about the flexibility and the ability to get out of the plumbing, right? I can go and experiment, I can scale up and have a lot of something and then not have much of it if that project doesn't work for me. And I also don't need to spend a lot of my time keeping the lights on. I can spend all my time innovating new platforms. And as a service, we'll provide that functionality effectively everywhere for the companies that get that right. And for the companies that get it wrong, I don't think they'll be around anymore.
Would you mind telling us what is the innovation culture like at Pure Storage?
It starts with what we started the conversation off with, right? It's getting the right culture. It's an equation that starts with being just maniacal about getting the best talent in the industry, and then also preserving that talent and that culture. And that is really the biggest thing in terms of driving innovation. If we hire the best developers and strategists and we keep them motivated, and COVID notwithstanding, we put them together to allow for cross-pollination, it really does magical things for innovation. It's a concept that isn't new. I mean, it's been true since Bell Labs, but it's rarely actually practiced because it can be expensive. It can be time consuming in terms of everybody wants to hire fast versus hire right. But when you do that, you get get really remarkable things. And there's a concept of the 10x engineer. If you can get more of those 10x engineers that are really capable of developing faster and developing better, and you put them together so that they play off of each other, it creates just a lab for innovation. The other part of it is just simple math, right? We devote a very large percentage of our revenue to R&D, on average of about 2 to 4x of any of our data storage competition. And that math and that's ultimately what drives innovation. Innovation isn't, even if you get all the right people, it's not free because you have to get enough of them. And then finally, it's allowing our strategists and our developers to focus on the long run. Even though we're a public company, we are highly focused on the 3 to 5 year out space because we think that that's where we have the opportunity to really win a tremendous amount of market share. Not where the market is today, but where it's going. We recently acquired a company called Portworx that's really about data services in the Kubernetes space. And we acquired the leader in the space. But that space is pretty nascent. It's not very large right now. And if you kind of like were to open up our books, you'd see we're investing way more in R&D in that space than would make sense given the current market size. But that's because we're convinced 2 to 3 years from now, there will be insane growth in containerized applications. We want to basically develop something that's so far ahead of everyone else there, that becomes so essential in that space, that 2 to 3 years out, when everybody's running containerized applications, they will also be running Portworx.